Sage Wanderer here, and happy Independence Day. Woohoo! Happy 4th of July. Be careful and handle those fireworks carefully because we don't want your 5 digits to turn into some stuff like this. Like, we want you to keep all your fingers intact. You know, my old man used to work building sawmill machinery in a machine shop. And there was the foreman there, and he would always give the safety, been the foreman there my whole life growing up, and he would always give the safety lecture in the morning. And he smoked cigarettes, and he would hold his cigarettes like this because these 3 fingers were missing. He would, now y'all want to be careful out there. He's smoking his cigarettes with only these 2 fingers left. Hey, that's the guy you want to give a safety lecture. But all you want to play an instrument, keep all 10 digits here. Be careful with them fireworks. Joking aside, 249 years this land we live in has been a nation. And it's changed. It's evolved. It's grown as anything would. It's become the greatest nation on the face of the planet. And it still is. You know, if there was a better place to live, I think I would have found it by now. And occasionally I'll look into some place and think about leaving this country and moving to another nation. And there's always some issue I run into where America's still the place to be. And one of the reasons I moved to Oklahoma is, although it's boring and we are the most exciting place in the world, Oklahoma is still one of the freest places in the world. But I want to look back now at the 249 years since the founding fathers set this wheel in motion. And I want to ask the question, what would they think of us? What would they think of us as a people? What would they think of us as a nation? What would they think of our government and our military today? And what would their opinions be of how far we've come? And would they be proud of us, or would they regret founding this country? That's a big question. We'll get into that. We'll talk about that in detail. But before we do, I want to thank all of you who support this channel financially. Your kind and generous gifts are greatly appreciated. They keep a roof over my head, and they keep food in my mouth and lights on here in the cabin. And if any of you are supporting this channel financially, I want you to know this wouldn't be possible without your financial support. So thank you so much. If you're thinking about becoming a financial supporter, you can find links in the description below to Cash App, to PayPal, and to my post office box. And you can help keep this channel on the air. I'm here working for you guys all week long. All right, so what would the founding fathers think of us? Well, to understand that, you got to know a thing or two about them. You know, this group of men and a few women decided that they did not like a government that taxed them, a government that took money out of their pocket and sent it back to the motherland. They didn't like that people hundreds or thousands of miles away were deciding their fate and had their hand in their pocket. If you want to get down to why the United States or the American colonies rebelled against England and left the control of England to found their own country, to the point where they were willing to die to make it happen, was over taxes. So the founding fathers, what would they think of America today? They would wonder why we are so cowardice, that we have not stood up and demanded lower taxes. Why is it we're willing to give, in some cases, more than half, if not even 3/4 of our income away to the federal government and their bloated bureaucracy? They would wonder what spineless men occupy this nation now, where we would let people hundreds or thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., drain our bank accounts, seize our homes, and force us to pay a tax at the point of a sword. I think they would be absolutely appalled at the mandatory federal income tax in this country, and how it is enforced under the threat of imprisonment or even death. That armed people would come to your house to demand taxes from you is something that they could not imagine in colonial America. That the thing they fought against, the level of taxation they fought against, was a tiny, tiny percentage of the kind of tax that we pay normally and as a matter of habit now. I think they would be shocked that we pay not just federal tax, but state tax, local tax, county taxes, city taxes, property taxes, gas taxes, sin taxes. That we pay taxes on travel. We pay taxes whether we leave or stay home. We pay road taxes, vehicle taxes, right? Everything is taxed on a multiple layer, right? We pay when we get paid, and if we pay somebody else some money, then they have to pay on that money as well. So $1 gets taxed over and over again each time it changes hands. I think that alone would infuriate the men like Thomas Jefferson, men like Benjamin Franklin, men like John Adams. These people, I think, would have been appalled at the fact that we willingly, without protest, pay the most exorbitant taxes that they could not imagine being shackled with back in those days. And so I think that, the Boston Tea Party was the thing that really kind of caused, I think, the British government to clamp down on the colonies and to send people to enforce their will upon these people in a faraway land that were under their control, supposedly, was because they attacked this ship and they threw all the tea in the ocean, in the bay in Boston, to protest attacks that we willingly pay now many times over. That the amount of taxation on the American people would be shocking to the founding fathers. They would see us as cowards and men who were okay with being slaves to a system that didn't serve them. That's my opinion. I have studied this deeply. I understand the character of these men. I've read all their writings, and I think they would see us as cowards. They would, because we're putting up with this bloated federal government and the mandatory federal taxes, and even our local taxes. They would just look at that and go, what is wrong with you people? Can't you see that you work for the system, that you don't have any real freedom? That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. I think they would be appalled at the bloated government that we so willingly accept. We're here in the middle of this battle. It looks like it's about sewed up for President Trump's big, beautiful bill. And Elon Musk has been very critical of the big, beautiful deal, a big, beautiful bill, the BBB, because this thing expands our debt and deficit. And I think the fact that the United States has all of these programs that give money away and has built into it provable fraud. That's one thing we can say about what Doge has uncovered, is that the fraud we suspected was always there. They proved, in fact, it's there. It's there. It's everywhere. It's deep. It's intrinsic in the system itself. It's a integral part of the system itself. And I think they would be appalled. Our founding fathers would see this as a criminal. They would see this as the reason why we have so many taxes, to support this bloated government. A lot of stuff in government, like lifelong politicians, are things that our founding fathers couldn't fathom. They put a system together of statesmen. They intended people of regular sort, people with regular lives, to come to Washington to do this a term of service to their country, and then like the citizen soldier, and then return to their normal life. They didn't expect people to be career politicians who would come to Washington, D.C. and never go home again. They never foresaw a time when government bureaucracy would become so bloated as to be a weight around the neck of the American people, enslaving us in these high taxes, that these bureaucrats have to justify their own position. And so they spend a lot of their time and energy just trying to figure out how to get more money out of the system. And the system of lobbyists or special interest groups pay money to congressmen and senators and make huge donations to get them to pass laws that favor their particular cause, or that kind of graft and corruption, which is we see now as normal part of doing business in Washington. I think it would make our founding fathers fighting mad. I think Thomas Jefferson would see this as the biggest racket that bigger than the organized crime, bigger than the slave system of the South. Thomas Jefferson would see this as absolute abuse of power, the way the system is designed. I think that they would see us as cowards for not rising up against this bureaucracy, for not putting down the waste and stopping the runaway spending. I think they would be appalled at stuff like corporate welfare, where corporations who were supposed to rise and fall and live and die by their own accomplishments and by their own value would be seen as too big to fail, and then receive government funding to stay afloat, that the government would pay out huge sums of money to take unsuccessful businesses that are going out of business, that are failing, and prop them up with free government giveaways. I think the way that government gives away money to education, to college students, all of this stuff would be seen as ridiculous. Because back in those days, education was seen as a privilege, right? You paid to go to college. Only the wealthy got to go to college because they're the only ones that could afford to send their kids to college, right? Unless you went into the ministry, unless you went into some kind of public service, and then you would get a reduced fee or free education in turn for your service in an area that needed help, whether it be a medical situation, or to be the pastor of a church, or an overseer of it was all for the purpose of the community. Then free education was available from the people that needed it, not from the government. The government never funded any of this stuff. Public schools, colleges being funded and held up by government grants. Well, the heyday they'd have with loan forgiveness on government loans for student loans. It's just forget about the people that paid back their loans. We're going to let all the people that didn't pay their loans off the hook. I think stuff like this would cause them to pull their powdered wigs out. It would cause them to pull their hair out by the roots. There are people, those people in that day and time can't imagine the dysfunction of our current world. I won't even get into what they might think of our culture, right? What they might think of our morals. That's a discussion for another time. What would they think of our government, the out of control spending, the deficit, the trillions of dollars, numbers they can't fathom, that we are in debt, that we're in debt to foreign nations. They definitely wouldn't understand foreign aid. They wouldn't understand us propping up other countries while Americans go hungry, propping up other countries while Americans are overtaxed, overburdened, and carrying the weight of all of this on their shoulders. They would look at working men and women and go, why don't you rise up against this slavery? Why don't you rise up against this system that's operating on your back, on your shoulders? The weight that you're carrying is ridiculous. Can't you see it? I think their writing would be an unending and continuous stream of outrage on this. If they had social media and had access to it and they were alive today, I can't imagine. Well, they would all be banned, right? They would immediately be banned. Shoot, I might get banned. I've been talking bad about taxes and government bloat and bureaucracy. The welfare state. The very fact that we take care of people who are able-bodied for their whole lives. There are people in this country that have never really worked. They've been on the government dole, and they've been getting welfare of one sort or another, whether it's in the form of welfare or disability, or work in the system. The way people work the system and get out of actually having to work for a living would make the founding fathers nauseous. Like, they would see that as a crime, as a criminal act, to live off of the government when you could just simply produce. You're in a free country. You can make something. You can build something. You can say something, right? You can sell a product, an idea. People will pay you just to talk and to hear you and to listen to you, right? But you have to do something. You can't just do nothing and get paid for it. But so many, well, there was a song written about that about a year and a half, couple years ago, by a man who set the music business on fire, if you recall. Those rich men north of Richmond. Rich men north of Richmond. Yeah, that was a very good song. Not crazy about the artist, but he wrote a great song. I think our founding fathers would be appalled at the separation of church and state and how that was twisted to mean something they never meant it to mean. You know, they came out of England where there was a government church, the Church of England, the Anglican Church. And this Church of England was politically powerful. And they had, the government had control of the church. It wasn't that the church had control of the government. That's not what our founding fathers were afraid of. They weren't afraid of the church being in control of the government. They were afraid of the government making laws to control the church. That's why the First Amendment states, and it's been corrupted, but this captures their meaning when it says that that Congress shall pass no law restricting the freedom of speech, religion, or the exercise thereof. So the separation of church and state was to keep the state out of the church. It wasn't to keep Christians out of government. It wasn't to keep Christian organizations from influencing the state. It was keep the state from influencing and controlling the church and outlawing certain forms of religion or certain religious ideas. And that's what the whole First Amendment is about political speech, but also religious freedom. And I think the way that's been twisted to say that you can't pray in school because it might offend somebody who's not a Christian. Well, that's restricting your religious right. You have the religious right to pray wherever you want to, in school, at work, right? Driving down the road, standing on a street corner. That there are places in America today where you can be arrested for offending people because you stood on a street corner in a public place and preached, right? People are being arrested because they're acting in hate speech from reading directly from the Bible in a public place. That kind of thing would be enough for the founding fathers to go pick up your muskets, right, or whatever you call them things today, and let's stand up against a government that's out of control. And we have to defend our rights and our freedom of religion. It's not freedom from religion; it's freedom of religion. And I think that's another thing that the founding fathers would just be beside themselves about. I think the erosion of our rights, the rights that they ensconced and made permanent in the Bill of Rights, I think that the way that our rights have been ignored, been trampled on, been twisted, been slowly eroded over time, I think that would infuriate the founding fathers. I don't think they would be celebrating today with fake explosions. I think they would be rebelling today with real ones, right? I think they would not be making fireworks. They'd be preparing to fire the works, if you know what I'm saying. That they would be ready to engage in another revolutionary war in this country simply because of the way our rights have been eroded, the way the Second Amendment has been twisted and gun control has been allowed. I think the founding fathers were not just opposed to gun control. That's the reason that they created the Second Amendment to begin with, was to try to prevent gun control from coming to America, from gun control to taking root in America. And yet here it is, and it has taken root. In the Big Beautiful Bill, or the what is it, the Porky Pig Party. As Elon Musk has been quoted recently, is calling both parties the Porky Pig parties. They, in that, have attempted to do away with the National Firearms Registry, which is where they register certain weapons that they deem as not normal. So short-barreled rifles, accessories like suppressors, sound suppressors, also mainly the short-barreled rifle and the suppressors. Placed in that Big Beautiful Bill was language that would do away with those restrictions, making a gun with a silencer, not a silencer, a suppressor, a gun with a suppressor, just another gun, right? Or a short-barreled rifle, just another rifle. And but that was taken out in the Senate, but they did reduce the tax to zero. Right? But I think it's gone back to the House of Representatives, where they're going to put that language back in. So we're to this day we're fighting against something that the Second Amendment was put in place to prevent. The Second Amendment was put in place to prevent this very thing: the taxation of certain weapons, the control of certain weapons, the control of who could have weapons, who couldn't have weapons. These things should be like they were when my dad was little, or even still when I was a kid, where you could just order a rifle off of Montgomery Ward's catalog. You don't know who Montgomery Ward's catalog was? Look it up. You could order from the Sears catalog, and it would just be sent straight to your house, no problem, right? But they keep passing new laws and new restrictions until it gets harder and harder to purchase them, possess them, legally own them. There's you have to become a law expert, especially when it comes to things like how many American-made parts do you have in your rifle versus how many foreign parts you have in your rifle, and how if you get that mix wrong and you have a rifle in your gun safe that has the wrong mix of American and foreign parts, you can go to prison. The founding fathers would be ready to go to war over such a thing. They would be absolutely disgusted by the quagmire and rules surrounding the possession of firearms that they saw as an inalienable human right to self-defense. So, yeah, and the freedom of speech, the censorship. Now there's a list of words you're not allowed to ever say in public. And whoever came up with the concept that you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, that's where your First Amendment rights end, and I just cry BS. I just say BS. Yeah, you can. You can do whatever you want. This is what the founding fathers meant in the First Amendment, that you can say what you want to who you want, as long as you're not physically threatening somebody. Physical threats is where the law is drawn, because the line is drawn, rather, because physical threats kind of require you to have a physical response. Like if you say to somebody that you're going to do something specific to them, then I believe that their natural inclination for self-defense is to just bring it to you and go, okay, let's do that now. Let's go ahead and do that now. If you're going to, why later? Why not right now? And so you have to have some rules concerning personal threats, right? But freedom of speech was absolute and should be absolute with very few exceptions. But this idea that you can say something on social media and then the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Gestapo of the United States law enforcement, going to show up to your house and heat you over this, right? They're going to put the heat on you. They're going to question you. They're going to intimidate you. They're going to threaten you with imprisonment. Once again, any one of these things would have caused our founding fathers to rise up in rebellion against this bloated, out-of-control federal government and restart from scratch, right? I don't think they would be out shooting off fireworks and celebrating right now. I think they would be activating their cell groups. I think they would be making big plans, because they understood that if you don't have freedom, you have nothing. That without freedom, you're just a slave to bureaucracy and control. Without freedom, the common man has nothing. He can rely on nothing. With freedom, anything is possible. So, what would our founding fathers think of this country? They would argue that we're no longer free. They would argue that some time ago we lost our freedoms and we're sleeping at the wheel, that we're handing our future generations over to slavery, to an out-of-control system where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and the working man has no chance to get ahead because he has to give so much to this bloated, out-of-control government. I'd like to be patriotic on this July 4th. But when I think about the men who actually gave their lives that this country would become a nation, those men in the Revolutionary War, those men who fought the Nazis so that we could be free in this country and not be subjected to oppression and to fascism and control, that they would look at us and go, we have become the thing we fought against. That we need to be liberated now from our own out-of-control government. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comment section. I still think America is the best nation on the planet. I don't think there's any place I'd rather be than right here. But we could do a lot to make this place better. And I don't think our founding fathers would be that proud of us as a people. I think they would see us in need of a wake-up call. Well, tell me what you think in the comments section. Don't forget to support the channel. It's made possible through your kind donations, which you'll find in the links in the description below. And we'll see you next time from my cabin down by the creek.